We acknowledge this land on which Knox College and the University of Toronto operate. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. As we meet today, both in person and remotely, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of all the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous people and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. While we cannot undo the past, and while our past continues into our present, we are committed to a different future and to doing our part to contribute to an equitable, just, and grace-filled society. Please be seated.
Faithful people, let us pray. Gracious God of truth and mercy, giver of life and light, Creator Christ and Spirit, what joy is ours to be as one this afternoon in Convocation Hall and through the wonder of live streaming, to give you the glory and to celebrate growth in your grace. We praise and adore you for your presence and care in every season and chapter of our lives. We rejoice in your patient and enduring covenant with us as we faithfully, in kindness and with courage, discern your will, steward your mysteries, lead and learn from the one we follow, and live as your children, loved to love by the power of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Coming together now to acknowledge the commitment and accomplishment of all graduates of Knox College and all those who helped them along their way, we ask your blessing upon this holy time in worship and in friendship. Grant us the gifts of encouragement and delight, confidence and compassion, trust and hope as we participate in this most wonderful time and go forth from here renewed and equipped for holy living. Your word declares, happy are those who find wisdom and those who get understanding. Happy we are for all graduates and each other, for what has been found in study and in service, that all the fruits of your Holy Spirit may find witness in and through us. May all we say and do now be pleasing to you and acceptable in your sight, dear God, one God, a blessed Trinity, world without end. Amen.
Vice Provost, Director of TST, faculty, staff, graduates, families and friends of graduates, ladies and gentlemen, and those joining us virtually. The convocation of any college, seminary, school or university is the highlight of the past academic year. Today we celebrate 179 years of theological education at Knox College and the achievements of the Knox class of 2023. A culturally diverse and gifted group who have completed degrees, certificates, and diplomas. This afternoon, we will confer a total of 54 degrees, diplomas, and certificates. 27 conjoined basic degrees, 6 Master of Divinity, 1 Master of Theological Studies, and 20 Masters of Pastoral Studies degrees, and 5 conjoined graduate degrees, 1 Master of Arts, 1 Master of Theology, 2 Doctor of Theology, and 1 Doctor of Philosophy. 17 certificates of spiritual care and psychotherapy, and 5 diplomas of the college, and 1 Doctorandus Divinitatis Honoris Causa degree. We have reason to be proud of our college and our students. Since the convocation of our classes of 2020 and 21 were conducted in its entirety via Zoom, and the convocation of our 2022 class was conducted with limited invitations and a commitment to social distancing, we have decided to invite these 3 classes to have their well-deserved walk of glory on the stage in recognition of their achievements and under very difficult circumstances. With this gesture, we want to honor you today. We will also award this afternoon the Willis Memorial Prize to the top graduating Master of Divinity student, previously known as the Gold Medal, and the Matheson Memorial Scholarship to the top graduating Master of Pastoral Studies and Master of Theological Studies student. This has been a refined award. Since this is the first time that this prize and scholarship are awarded using these designations, and this designation and redefinement, Professor Christine Mitchell, our academic dean, will say something more about this and the new name when these 2 awards are conferred. All of this, of course, is only possible through our membership of the Toronto School of Theology and its affiliation with the University of Toronto. Without this membership and affiliation, it would not have been possible for Knox College to offer conjoint courses and award prestigious University of Toronto degrees to our students. I therefore would like to extend a word of thanks to Professor Darren Dias, Executive Director, Toronto School of Theology, and Professor Susan McCain, Vice Provost, Academic Programs and Vice Provost, Innovations and Undergraduate Education, not only for their presence here today, but also for the privilege to be part of the University of Toronto community via the Toronto School of Theology. Thank you. Be assured that we will always cherish and foster this relationship, and today again commit ourselves to work with the other colleges to make the Toronto School of Theology and the University of Toronto institutions of excellence in the study of theology, religion, and related disciplines. I also wish to thank the faculty and staff of the other colleges, the principals present here today, and the TST Darren office for their support of Knox academic mission. The achievements of our graduates also wouldn't have been possible without the contribution and dedication of Knox College's faculty and staff. I would like to extend a personal word of thanks to our academic dean, Professor Christine Mitchell, and Professors Charles Fensham, Brian Irwin, Stuart MacDonald, Bradley McLean, Angela Smith, Sarah Travis, John Fishers, and Mi Wang Yang, who, among all the more mundane duties they have, teaching, marking exams, sitting in endless committee meetings, making a difference in the lives of our students through acts of generosity, the extra efforts that they take, or simply by modeling great teaching and scholarship. They make a difference by being tough and demanding when it's needed, by kindness when it's needed, and by the enthusiasm and love of learning they exemplify to their students. This afternoon, I pay tribute to them for making a difference, sometimes without even knowing it. The principal characteristic of a college or university and its great teachers should be a relentless discontent for the current state of knowledge. It is this discontent, not being satisfied with what we think we know, how securely we know it, and what we make with those random pieces of data that do not quite fit our theories, that should push us to explore further, to ask more questions, to look into new possibilities, and to advance human knowledge. University is about unbounded curiosity. This I have seen in the work and research and lecturing of the faculty at Knox College, and I'm proud today to say I am their principal. To our graduates, it is sometimes said that most of us can look back and identify a teacher, whether in grade school or in high school or in university or at Knox College, who has shaped our lives in some way. Someone who has made us think differently, made us look at the world differently, and someone who has inculcated in us a love for learning. I hope for you, graduate today, this is also the case when it comes to the faculty of Knox College, and that you will never stop learning. Knox College is also fortunate to have a strong staff team who support the academic life of the college on a daily basis. I particularly wish to thank those who lead the various administrative units and their personnel. Mr. Toyin van Bekbe, our newly appointed Director of Finance and Administration, and Mr. Sanjay Dada, our Assistant to the Director of Finance and Administration. Mr. Joan Priest, our Director of Library Services, and their super dedicated staff, Anne McGillivray and Laura Ellery. Our Registrar, Mr. Sean Stewell, who organized everything today with his team, Assistant Registrar Kyla Thompson and Nicole Hume, our Admissions Counselor and Recruitment Coordinator. Mr. John Brandt, Jenny Lee Saralogos, and Stephanie Hanna in our Advancement Office, and our College Concierge, Master of All Trades, Francisco Silva. A special thank you is extended to Mrs. Melia Bennett, my assistant, who always remembers everything and never misses anything. Melia, thank you for keeping me on my toes. Finally, I want to mention again the name of Sister Sarah Travis for taking on the responsibility this year to organize our weekly chapel services, duly assisted by Mr. Peter Merrick as Director of Chapel Music. Mr. Peter Merrick is also playing the organ today. Thank you so much, Peter. As principal and on behalf of the students, faculty, and staff, I wish to thank the Board of Governors of Knox College, a dedicated group of highly skilled volunteers who donate their time, talents, expertise, experience, and resources to the life and the work of the college. The board is essential to good governance, and during the past year, working together with the principal, faculty, and executive staff, has continued to execute Knox mission, vision, and strategic plan. As a result of this working together, several exciting new initiatives will be rolled out in the next few months, aiming to support the churches of the PCC and the wider church by addressing the present needs of interim moderators, interim ministry, and laity who have taken responsibility for ministering the word and sacraments in close to a half of the churches in the PCC. 2 members of the Board of Governors has either concluded their term or has resigned from the board. Therefore, we wish to thank Mrs. Carol Jackson and Mr. Mark McIlvain for the excellent service to the board. The college continues to appreciate the ongoing interest and support of its many graduates from both Ewart College and Knox College, and its many former residents who continue to feel a strong bond with the college. We also would like to acknowledge the financial support we have received from the PCC, the Ewart Endowment, and all our donors in supporting the work and mission and vision of the college. The Center for Asian Canadian Theology and Ministry, under the leadership of its director, the Reverend Dr. Dong Ha Kim, continues to provide support for intercultural studies and ministry. Knox College is looking forward to the 2023-2024 academic year. Apart from keep on fulfilling our mission on theological education as we prepare to think deeply about God, live authentically in Christian faith, and lead courageously in shifting social and spiritual landscapes, we will especially be focusing on congregational vitality and growth and helping professionals and churches to respond to the increasing spiritual and mental health needs in the society. Watch this space. I thank you for being here today.
Principal Van Eck, Principal Emerita Gordon, Reverend Summers, Elder Ransom, and members of the clergy, the graduating class, faculty, staff members, alumni, and assembled guests. As Vice Provost, Innovations in Undergraduate Education and Academic Programs at the University of Toronto, it is my great privilege to bring greetings this afternoon on behalf of Chancellor Patton, President Gertler, Vice President and Provost Regehr, and the entire University of Toronto community. I'm very pleased to join Knox College's convocation, and I'm delighted to congratulate the members of the graduating class of 2023. And I would also like to acknowledge the graduates who are here today from the classes of 2020, 2021, and 2022, whose convocation was impacted by the restrictions in place due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to offer special greetings and congratulations today to the honorary degree recipient, the Reverend Peter Bush, for the well-deserved recognition that you will be receiving this afternoon. And gratitude as well to Elder Lori Ransom, Indigenous Peoples Consultant to the World Council of Churches and Reconciliation, and Indigenous Justice Animator for the United Church of Canada, for delivering today's convocation address. Presently, as throughout history, the University of Toronto hosts valuable dialogues and discussions between theology and its faculties of of arts and science, medicine, and law. Throughout this creative and collaborative work, we recognize the continuing importance and role of theology in higher education. Our institutions have grown together over the past many decades. Through the partnership established by the Toronto School of Theology, this mission has been amplified. I am honored to be here to celebrate Knox College in advancing this academic discipline in the context of the contemporary world. Many of you have spent years investing yourselves in the work and community of theological scholarship and stewardship. We know that you leave this place equipped to better understand and address the challenges of a complex world. Your contributions are immensely valuable, not only to the communities of faith, but to the university and to society as a whole. We would like to note one other important tradition being honored here today. Many of today's graduates are receiving conjoint degrees, which have been approved by Knox College, the University of Toronto, and the Toronto School of Theology. Conjoint degree recipients have the privilege of claiming membership in the alumni communities of both Knox College and the University of Toronto. Both are institutions that honor and maintain their relationship to practice and tradition. To everyone graduating and being honored here today, on behalf of the University of Toronto, congratulations. You are receiving your degrees and denominational requirements based on hard work and perseverance that you have put into this. You should be exceptionally proud to look back on this very significant milestone in your lives. I wish you very much fulfillment and joy as you move on to write the next chapters of your lives. Congratulations.
Good afternoon. Our first business today is to award 2 awards to our top graduating students. The Willis Memorial Prize is the successor to the gold medal. It was created this year and is being awarded for the first time at this convocation. It is awarded annually to the student graduating with the Master of Divinity degree with the highest cumulative grade point average. The award is named for the Reverend Dr. Michael Willis, the first principal of Knox College. Reverend Dr. Willis was appointed Professor of Theology at Knox in 1847 and served as principal from 1857 to 1870. He was named to the Senate of the University of Toronto in 1851 and also served as an examiner there until 1863. Reverend Dr. Willis was an abolitionist, and he was the first and only president of the Anti-Slavery Society of Canada, founded in 1851, and he was involved with the Underground Railway at the northern terminus. He also defended the rights of Jews to carry on business in Toronto, earning himself the displeasure of some prominent Presbyterian clergy in the city. We believe he is a fitting figure to be the namesake of this award. We'll be awarding the 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023 recipients with the Willis Memorial Prize. And so I would like to invite Dave Lee from the class of 2020 to please come up. From the class of 2021, Joshua He.
Congratulations. Thank you very much.
From the class of 2022, Brett And And from the class of 2023, this year's graduating class, James McDonald. The Mathewson Memorial Scholarship is awarded annually to the student graduating from one of our two-year degree programs, the Master of Theological Studies or the Master of Pastoral Studies degrees with the highest cumulative grade point average. This is the first year that this award has been explicitly designated for the top graduate of these two degrees, and we will be awarding 3 of the 4 classes here. So I'd like to invite Anne McGillivray, who graduated in 2021 with a Master of Theological Studies. And from the class of 2022, Jonathan Obara, also a Master of Theological Studies degree recipient. And this year's recipient, the class of 2023, also receiving the Master of Theological Studies degree, Mary Claire Brockenshire-Lemisky.
Thank you, Christine. It is my privilege to introduce to you our speaker today, Laurie Ransom. Laurie Ransom, an ordained elder of the Presbyterian Church in Canada, has worked in support of Canada's Indigenous peoples throughout her career. In 2017, Laurie was appointed as the first Healing and Reconciliation Program animator for the United Church of Canada, and recently she was also appointed as Indigenous Peoples Consultant to the World Council of Churches. As Reconciliation and Indigenous Justice Animator, Laurie is responsible for designing and implementing activities to advance the United Church of Canada's commitments to overcome the legacy of the Church's involvement in residential schools and to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's call to action. And as Indigenous Peoples Consultant to the WCC, she is inter alia responsible for developing a framework for the next phase of the Ecumenical Indigenous Peoples Network and the mapping out of the key strategies for the WCC Indigenous Peoples work arising from the WCC's 11th Assembly. And if she's not busy enough already, she served in 2021 as the Interim Executive Director of Kairos, Canadian Ecumenical Justice Initiatives. I wonder when she sleeps. Laurie's understanding of the issues of importance to Indigenous peoples and the policies which affect Indigenous peoples and communities started as early as 1987, when she, from 1987 to 1995, held several positions in the Federal Department of Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development in the sectors of intergovernmental relations, executive services and communications, parliamentary relations, and research land claims funding. From 1995 to 2005, she held the position of Director, Executive Services and Communications, Ontario Region, Indigenous Affairs and Northern Development, Canada, being responsible for the delivery of communications and support services to the Minister and Deputy Head of Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development. During these 10 years, she also simultaneously held the positions of Assistant Director, Human Resources, Ontario Region, and Assistant Director in the Governmental Affairs, South Ontario Region, Indigenous Affairs and Northern Development, Canada. In 2006, she was appointed as Healing and Reconciliation Animator of the Presbyterian Church in Canada, designing and implementing a plan of activities to further the aims and objectives of the Healing and Reconciliation Initiative. 5 years later, in 2011, she became the Senior Advisor, Church Relations for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, and in the period 2016 to 2017, she held the position of Advisor, Federal Schools, Ontario Region, Indigenous Affairs and Northern Development, Canada. This is a mouthful. And from this, we understand why Laurie was the obvious choice to be appointed as the first Healing and Reconciliation Program Animator for the United Church of Canada in 2017, and as recent as 2023, the Indigenous Peoples Consultant to the World Council of Churches. She has published 3 academic articles, co-authored 2 chapters in 2 different publications, and her passions include classical music, opera, theater, ballet, art, film, books, museums, and travel. Where she finds time for this, I do not know. Laurie, today, Knox Scholars honors you for 35 years of service in Indigenous affairs in Canada. And we are looking forward to your address titled Reconciliation, Spiritual Violence, and the Mystery of Indigenous Christians. Ladies and gentlemen, Laurie Ransom is in the house.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Principal Van Eck, for that very generous introduction and review of my career. I'm feeling a little older suddenly. And especially, however, for the honor given to me to speak at today's celebration. I also want to acknowledge the historic relationships of the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples to this land. Greetings, governing board members, faculty and staff, and distinguished guests, and most of all, to the graduates being honored here today. I want to extend my profound congratulations to each and every one of you as you mark an academic milestone in your careers. I expect many of you are accompanied by family members and friends who have supported you in your journeys. And we thank them also for all they have done to support you in realizing your achievements. As much as today is a day of excitement and celebration, I surmise that at the back of your minds, there may be a little trepidation, uncertainty, and even some worry about what the future may hold. As students who have been thinking about God and the church and what it means to be followers of Jesus Christ on a daily, at times hourly basis for the past few years, and far more deeply, I expect, than most of us who show up for a service once a week or so, I'm sure you cannot help but be worried about the future of the church in Canada and of the Presbyterian Church in Canada in particular. Our numbers are declining rapidly. Our members are getting grayer rapidly. Historic church buildings, centers of their communities, are either closing or being repurposed as something other than places of worship. So I'm sure you're wondering, as probably most of us present here today are wondering, what will the church look like in 20 years, in 50 years, in 100 years? And as leaders of the church and those entering new leadership roles, you must be wondering, how am I called to respond? How are we called to respond? As excellent as my preparation has been here at Knox, am I prepared? Are we prepared to lead the church into the future? As I begin to suggest some responses to these questions, allow me to wax nostalgic for a moment. I vividly remember a beautiful spring day like this, the day I was awarded my first degree. I remember the mint green dress I wore to the ceremony, which was held at the National Arts Centre of Ottawa. I remember the excitement of joining family members for a gourmet brunch at the Westin Hotel across the street. I remember, to getting my degree, how my classmates and I exited the stage and went backstage, opened our degree folders, eagerly looking for the transcripts of our final grades that had been stuffed behind our certificates. I was so excited. I had some excellent degrees, but I was most excited about that D in biophysical chemistry. I'd been so worried about passing that one. Yes, biophysical chemistry. It's very clear to me how I got to be standing here in front of you today. It all began with my Bachelor of Science in biochemistry. Brilliant preparation for a career working on Indigenous issues and the church. Just perfect. You perhaps are getting my first point. That as new graduates, you may think you have some idea about where the degree you have been awarded today is going to lead you. But as students of theology, you will also know that Creator may have other plans for you. Perhaps one of the most important skills I developed as a scientist was the ability to remain open-minded, to never assume that the results of an experiment, even countless experiments, could not still be faulty at some level and subject to correction, subject to new revelations, if you will, future discoveries that enlighten our understanding in ways as yet unimagined by the scientists in our day and age. In other words, curiously, as a student of science, you could say I learned to be open to the movement of the Spirit in my life. This has certainly been reinforced in later years with encounters with other Christians, particularly those from more evangelical churches who look for evidence, now there's a scientific word, evidence of the Spirit at work in their encounters with others, and of what the Spirit is telling them as they seek to answer profound theological questions. It has also been reinforced by my time spent among Indigenous peoples. Spirit language is certainly familiar to Indigenous peoples. In my experience, they have a much more developed appreciation for the mysteries of the universe and of the created world than do many 21st century Westerners. Indigenous peoples accept that mystery remains at the heart of creation. I cherish a line from a charming little movie called Keeping Mum. It features the great British comedian Rowan Atkinson. He plays an Anglican priest, and mysteriously, he is refreshed in his ministry and his ability to communicate the gospel to others by an encounter with a grandmotherly Maggie Smith. She plays a serial killer. That's somewhat beside my point. The line I cherish comes when we see Atkinson addressing a gathering of clergy. He quotes Isaiah chapter 55, verse 8. "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways." Atkinson explains that what God is really saying here is, I'm a mystery. Live with it. God, Creator, Spirit is mystery. And I wonder if in answering questions about the future, we should do what has become somewhat fashionable in our postmodern day and age, and that is to do some unlearning where God is concerned. Unlearning, perhaps a dangerous concept for a university crowd. By unlearning, I wonder if we've developed too comfortable a sense that we understand God. Perhaps our centuries spent in excellent places of learning, such as Knox, has led us to forget that ultimately God is still a mystery, and we must deal with it. Perhaps, like Indigenous peoples, we should allow ourselves to redevelop a more acute sense of our relationship with God as the great mystery, a more humble awareness of our place in the cosmos as one of God's many creations. Perhaps this would more clearly orient us in the work we are called to do as the church, our work of reconciliation. After many years in the pews, I found myself rather startled in 2006, the year I first began to be paid for my work in the church, to read that reconciliation is what the gospel is about. At the time, I was gifted with a book written by someone I suspect Principal Van Eck knows, the South African theologian John Deguchi. In his book, very clearly titled Reconciliation, Deguchi included what I have come to think of as a remarkably accurate summation of what the gospel is about, saying it's about reconciliation. It's about reconciliation with God, it's about reconciliation with other people, and it's about reconciliation with creation. Not bad. If the God is indeed a call to reconciliation, it would seem that part of our response to being the church of the future has to be to consider the quality of our relationships with others, all peoples, everywhere, and the quality of our relationship with the environment. I know I'm hardly the first person to suggest that we focus our efforts fulsomely to live into our central gospel calling, to leave our gifts at the altar and go and first be reconciled to our brothers and sisters, including our brothers and sisters in the natural world, the birds, the animals, the plants, the fish, the waters, the land, the air, and truly take steps to repair what has gone wrong. We may yet witness to Christ in ways that attract the attention of the very many people in our country and around the world who wonder what relevance the church has to their lives and the challenges we are experiencing. This deep reckoning with the task of reconciliation, I suggest, includes some deep theological wrestling with the diversity of human spirituality and how we treat and have entreated individuals who follow different spiritual paths, not least among them Indigenous peoples. Think of what Indigenous peoples have experienced. Those of you who have participated in the Kairos blanket exercise know the story. Remember how we walk on the blankets, representing the hundreds of millions of Indigenous peoples who lived and thrived in the Americas for centuries before European contact. How that contact led to disease, to war, to displacement of communities to remote, unfamiliar lands, and ultimately to the decimation of those millions of Indigenous peoples. Then on to the genocidal attack on Indigenous identity in residential schools, and to ongoing discrimination and racism up to the present. It is not so long ago that many people in Canada said that they expected Indigenous peoples would die out or be assimilated into the body politic, become indistinguishable from everyone else. However, Indigenous peoples never said this or worried about becoming extinct or assimilated. They have trusted in their Cree, Inuit, Mi'kmaq, Algonquin, Métis, Coast Salish, Innu, Ojibwe birthrights and looked with hope towards their future, raising their children as best they can in their traditions, even in the face of a society that until recently was hostile to them. And while their numbers are smaller than they used to be, while they no longer have complete control over what happens on their lands, and while their place as the only peoples who lived in this continent, as the one people who lived in this continent has vanished for good, there's no question Indigenous peoples have a future, and a bright future. It's important for us, I suggest, to also remember that the spiritual violence we need to reconcile with does not stop with Indigenous peoples. Looking around at our increasingly pluralistic society, I wonder what violence from our historical relationships with our Muslim, Jewish, Sikh, Hindu, Shinto, and other neighbors demands attention from us as people of God in order to restore right relationships. We are learning. I see many signs of hope, not least in the Presbyterian Church in Canada's recent reckoning with how it has treated the Two-Spirit and LGBT community. And I know much more needs to be done to reconcile with the harm done to members of that community. There is no shortage of reconciliation work for the people of God as we consider our future as the church. Are we equipped to meet the challenge? Here's where trust in what is mysterious and unknowable becomes so important. For me, one of the most significant signs of the enduring power of the Christian message is visible in the faces of Indigenous peoples the world over who call themselves Christian. As I've noted, many of these Indigenous Christians, especially in Canada, have had sustained experience of racism and violence as a direct result of their contact with other Christians. And yet, the Christian message has resonated positively with them. And they've not only held on to what they have been taught, but they are working actively to carry the Christian message forward and build new kinds of Christian Indigenous ministries. Are we not astonished that this should be so? Is this not a mystery? And is it not astonishing that Indigenous peoples are trying to find new ways of being Christian after centuries of outright attack on their indigeneity at a time when the church itself seems to be in incline, and therefore there would seem to be no reason for them to carry on in the church? Remarkably, I don't hear these Indigenous Christians worrying that much about the future of the church. They're concerned about the present, the well-being of their communities, the need for healing, and above all, for their children's future. Perhaps it is a direct result of their never having existed at the centers of power in the church. Their church communities are small and no more likely to grow than other churches, but they're carrying on and wonderfully experimenting with new ways of being the church. There's a growing movement among Indigenous Christians to claim leadership of new forms of Christian community, often drawing from Indigenous cultural and spiritual traditions, and sometimes by outright rejection of almost all the language and forms of what we would recognize as church. I think, for example, of the ministry led by the Reverend Mary Fontaine, soon to be installed as moderator of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. Mary's Hummingbird Ministries is a ministry conducted in circles, sharing circles, healing circles, and teaching circles. It places emphasis on healing through the arts. And Mary has had success bringing her Prairie Cree traditional teachings to the Coast Salish peoples of the Lower Mainland of British Columbia. Daring, risky, experimental, yet faithful, preaching reconciliation with others and with creation. I also think of Terry LeBlanc and the leaders of the North American Institute for Indigenous Theological Studies, creating what amounts to a new Indigenous Christian seminary, a new seminary, encouraging other Indigenous Christians to pursue advanced studies, developing new Indigenous Christian theologies, breathing new life, new energy, and new wisdom in how we understand and interpret our sacred Old and New Testaments, and incidentally, inspiring many non-Indigenous Christians to learn from them. I hope we may draw inspiration from these and the many other Indigenous Christians, what they are doing around the globe, usually with very few resources, to reimagine what the church will be in the coming decades and into the next century. And guess what? There are numerous opportunities for partnership with these Indigenous Christians, especially in urban communities where the majority of Indigenous peoples now live. So to return to the question I posed to you earlier, as new graduates, wondering, am I prepared? Are we prepared to lead the church into the future? As someone who is a member of a First Nation community in Canada and who has worked among Indigenous peoples from the time I concluded my biochemistry training, my sense is that we are prepared. All of us here today are prepared. I say this because I have seen in the cultural and spiritual resurgence of Indigenous peoples how the peoples whom God has created to inhabit this earth are emphatically resilient, emphatically creative, emphatically disposed to helping each other out and moving forward, and emphatically peoples of hope and optimism. When history looks back on us, I hope and trust they will see us not as having lived in an age of a time of decline in the church, but in an age of experimentation and transportation and transformation, even a time of reformation as the people of God, who lived into our calling to reconcile with God, with other peoples, and with Mother Earth. Congratulations to all of you. Chimigwech. Thank you. Merci.
Principal Van Eck, I present to you the candidates for the conferral of the degree Master of Divinity. And I would ask all the MDiv graduands to stand, please.
By the authority of the Governing Board of Knox College and University of Toronto, you are hereby admitted to the degree Master of Divinity.
You may be seated. Principal Van Eck, I present to you those students who completed the program requirements of the Master of Divinity and the denominational requirements of the Diploma of the College. Allison Jennifer Agnew. James Andrew McDonald. Yunjai James Park. Christine Ellisine Samuel. And Matthew Paul Vazzari in absentia. Principal Van Eck, I present to you the student who completed the program requirements of the Master of Divinity, Hyungshin Kim. Principal Van Eck, I present to you the candidate for the conferral of the degree Master of Theological Studies. And if I could ask you to rise, please.
By the authority of the Governing Board of Knox College and University of Toronto, you are hereby admitted to the degree Master of Theological Studies.
Principal Van Eck, I present to you the student who completed the program requirements of the Master of Theological Studies, Mary Claire Brockenshire-Lumiski. Principal Van Eck, I present to you the candidates for the conferral of the degree Master of Pastoral Studies. If I could ask all of the MPS graduands to stand, please.
By the authority of the Governing Board of Knox College and University of Toronto, you are hereby admitted to the degree Master of Pastoral Studies.
Please be seated. Principal Van Eck, I present to you those students who completed the program requirements of the Master of Pastoral Studies. Sharon Elizabeth Benjamins, with a focus in social services. Stephen Andrew Boos, with a focus in spiritual care. And In Young Huang, with a focus in congregational leadership in absentia. Principal Van Eck, I present to you those students who completed the program requirements of the Master of Pastoral Studies degree and the Spiritual Care and Psychotherapy certificate. Edwin Barclay Anderson. Nikita Gisela Salvacion Arignello. Tyler Borg. Vanessa Casalenuovo. Nicholas Corrado. Bruce Edwin Dow. Zachary Alexander Hare in absentia. Chongsun Aaron Ko. Anne Komaneski. Kyung-Yun Lee in absentia. Megan Julia Mutu. Darlington Operaike. Mark Pachi in absentia. Chelsea Adeline Tan. Sani Yuat San Tang in absentia. Laura Diane Woolner. And Zoe Jiyi Zhao. Principal Van Eck, I present to you Hewitt Holmes, the candidate for the conferral of the degree Master of Arts in absentia.
By the authority of the Governing Board of Knox College and University of Toronto, I hereby admitted to the degree of Arts in absentia.
Principal Van Eck, I present to you the candidate for the conferral of the degree Master of Theology in absentia, Monica Barecci Farkas.
Christine, you read the name before I confer the degree. By the authority of the Governing Board of Knox College and University of Toronto, you are hereby admitted to the degree of Master of Theology in absentia.
Principal Van Eck, I present to you the graduates for the conferral of the degree Doctor of Theology. May I ask the THD graduand to stand, please?
By the authority of the Governing Board of Knox College and University of Toronto, you are hereby admitted to the degree Doctor of Theology.
You may be seated. Principal Van Eck, I present to you those students who completed the program requirements of the Doctor of Theology. Hyungjung Choi, who presented a thesis titled, Always Remember Your Baptism, the Significance of John Calvin's Baptismal Spirituality for Presbyterian Churches in Korea. And Lisa van der Leek, who produced a thesis titled A Eucharistic Reading of Calvin's Theology of the Imago Dei. Principal Van Eck, having produced a thesis titled Developing Place-Bound Answerability Towards Just Intercultural Christian Education for a Multicultural Society, I present to you Hee-Jin Choi, the candidate for the conferral of the degree Doctor of Philosophy in absentia.
By the authority of the Governing Board of Knox College and University of Toronto, you are hereby admitted to the degree Doctor of Philosophy in absentia.
We're now at that part of the program where we're going to acknowledge those who graduated in those pandemic years. Principal Van Eck, Director Diaz, Vice Provost McCann. To say that we had no time to think about it would be an understatement. When classes had to be shut down during the last few weeks in the winter term of 2020, we just did it. And the entire focus was on finishing those last weeks. Anyway, this wasn't going to last that long, would it? That's what we imagined at the time. But as it became apparent that it was more serious and longer, plans had to be put in place for convocation. and with good spirit. The class of 2020 went through a virtual dress rehearsal, and then the first and what we hoped would be the last virtual convocation, and we'd all get together the next year. Well, it's 3 years later, and I'm honored to read the names of those in that class. And those who are present, I would invite, as your name is said, I'd invite you forward to be greeted by the principal. For the Master of Divinity degree and diploma of the college, Chad Walter Dennis Bolton. Jauk Paul Koo. Dave Lee. Mary Pik-chun Lee, Edward Juman Yu. For the Master of Divinity degree and the General Assembly certificate, Deborah Ann Rolls. The Master of Divinity degree, Ha Na Rosalind Na. And the Master of Theological Studies degree, Im Hyung Wang. The Master of Religious Education degree, Hyo Jae Lee. The Master of Pastoral Studies degree, Angelica Atkins, Tyler Scriven, Hong Fang Wang. The Master of Pastoral Study degree and Spiritual Care and Psychotherapy certificate, Susie Soo-young Choi. The Certificate in Theological Studies, Anita Maureen Evans. The Master of Arts degree, Joshua Ratzlaff. The Master of Theology degree, Songpok Ham. Pil J. Lee, Munsu Son, Sanghun Stephen Yoon, and the Doctor of Philosophy degree, Sanghap Kim. That was the class of 2020.
The Knox College class of 2021, the Master of Divinity degree and diploma of the college, Cecilia Apaeje, Apaeje, Candace Leah Shavana Bahadur, Gerald Leo Gallant, Mark Otang. The Master of Divinity degree and the General Assembly certificate, Thomas S. Mason. The Master of Divinity degree, Inku Anthony Cho, Joshua Ha. The Master of Divinity and Master of Religious Education degree, Une Grace Ko. The Master of Theological Studies degree, Hyunju Karen Kim, Miriam Kim, and Anne McGilvery. The Master of Pastoral Studies degree and Spiritual Care and Psychotherapy certificate, Grace Can Chung, Loris de Florio de la Colinière, Jessica Teresa Jinju, David Michael Ramkalawan, Clement Thao Hao Shim, Antonio Syracuse. Perry Ho-Fi So, Jonathan Brendan Zarb. The Master of Arts degree, Dongjin Park. The Master of Theology degree, Connie Jane Vissers. The Doctor of Ministry degree, Jonathan Mark Schmidt. And the Doctor of Philosophy degree, Hyunjun David Bay and Sarah Yu Han.
And then it was 2022. And we thought surely this would be the year. And it was, sort of. In order to honor pandemic restrictions, we had an in-person convocation in the Knox Chapel, but every grad was limited to one guest. And we were spread out across the chapel. And it turned into a rather meaningful gathering, curiously enough, in such a strange context. And so it is my privilege today to read the names of those who graduated with us last year. Receiving the Master of Divinity degree and the Diploma of College, Dongwen Jung, Byron Nelson Mark Kappas, Jinwei Kim, Gumjae Lee, Jonathan Yoon Jae Lee, and Brett Main. Those who received the Master of Divinity degree, David Robert Parker, Sang-Kyun Yoon, and Christian Yoon. Master of Theological Studies, Walton Kai Sing Chan, and Jonathan Obara. Jonathan, would you come forward to greet the principal? Stand up. 2022 was the first conferral of a student who completed the Certificate in Theological Studies. And that was Sonia Brule. The Master of Pastoral Studies degree, Jun Ho Chang, John David Lindsay, and a student who enjoyed her time with us so much, she's now begun D-Min studies with us this very summer, Celine Bianca Phillips. Graduates of the Master of Pastoral Studies degree and the Spiritual Care and Psychotherapy Certificate, Chinyelo Nikemakonam Ambango, Michael Douglas Burns, Sun Young Sunny Choi, Bonnie Garke Lam, Susan Punamashavan, Oshola Jonathan Oladipe. And those students who received the Doctor of Philosophy degree, Yunju Chung, Ansung Kim, and Esser Kim, the class of 2022.
It is at this point in the convocation that we recognize Knox College students who have completed doctoral studies awarded at the University of St. Michael's College. In November 2019, Junhee Lee, Glenn McCullough, Taekji Hwan. November 2020, Hyunho Shin. November 2021, Moon Jung Choi and Daehee Kim. And finally, in November 2022, Dakwon Choi, whose thesis was entitled A Comparative Study in the Pneumatology of John Wesley and Jürgen Moltmann, Implication of the Cosmic Hope in the Holy Spirit. There's a slight alteration in your program. My colleague and friend, Professor John Vissers, does not have a voice. And so I am going to be reading the citation, and John will do the hooding. We've done a lot of things together over the last 6 years, so this is just one more. I would invite Peter to please stand. And John has written this citation. Principal Van Eck, Director Diaz, Vice Provost McCann, it is my privilege to present the Reverend Peter Bush for the degree Doctor of Divinity honoris causa. Knox College confers the honorary Doctor of Divinity degree on those who have made distinguished contributions in at least 2 of 6 areas of service. Our candidate today has met that criteria for all 6. This is extraordinary and impossible to capture in the few words of this presentation. However, let me try. The son of missionaries, Peter grew up between the Middle East and Canada. He studied history at Queen's University and graduated with a BA and MA. Sensing a call to serve the church and to study theology and church history, Peter completed a Master of Theological Studies at what was then Ontario Theological Seminary, now Tyndale University and Seminary, followed by Master of Divinity Studies here at Knox College, graduating in 1989. For over 30 years, Peter has been a faithful and creative congregational minister in remote, small town, and urban churches. Flin Flon, Manitoba, Mitchell, Ontario, Winnipeg, Manitoba, and now in Fergus, Ontario. In each place, Peter has thought deeply about the meaning of the gospel with his people as he preached and taught. He has lived among them as a caring pastor and authentic follower of Jesus Christ, and he has led them courageously in worship and witness in their community. Beyond his core commitment as minister of word and sacraments in local congregations, Peter has also given creative leadership at all levels of the church's life. For 30 years, Peter served as editor of Presbyterian History and wrote many of its feature articles. He is a gifted historian who has documented Presbyterian stories across Canada, including important research on the Presbyterian Church in Canada's involvement in residential schools, which has contributed to the work of truth and reconciliation. One of the nominators said this: his gifts as an historian are special to the denomination. Peter has the ability to compose a story about someone, and the story becomes a history lesson that we will cherish for years to come. In addition to his work with the Committee on History, Peter has served on the Pension and Benefits Board and the Church Doctrine Committee. He is currently the convener of the Trustee Board and co-chair of the Special Listening Committee in response to the petitions of the Hongkong Presbyteries. Peter has chaired and organized national conferences, including a 2002 gathering on the history and practice of evangelism within the Presbyterian Church, and a 2017 conference on the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. In 2017, Peter was elected as moderator of the 143rd General Assembly, the highest office in the Presbyterian Church in Canada. In his role as moderator, he wrote and published an open letter of repentance to the LGBTQI+ community for the church's failure to be a safe and welcoming space. He is a strong advocate for an intercultural and inclusive church. One nominator said that Peter embodies the truth that all good theology begins in prayer. His prayers on public issues, in particular spread through a series of social media, have been a great source of prophetic insight and pastoral comfort. As a church historian and a student of congregations and missions, he has written 3 books: Western Challenge, The Presbyterian Church in Canada on the Prairies and the North, 1885 to 1925, In Dying We Are Born, and Where 20 or 30 Are Gathered, co-authored with the Reverend Dr. Christine O'Reilly. Knox College confers 3 doctoral degrees: a professional doctor of ministry, an academic doctor of philosophy and theological studies, and the honorary doctor of divinity. As the author of numerous articles and books, academic, professional, and popular, Peter could have qualified for any of Knox's doctoral degrees had he wished to, but he's chosen to serve the church on the ground in the community for the sake of the gospel and the glory of God. Those who know Peter or have seen him in action know that he cares deeply and passionately about people, about the gospel, about justice, about the flourishing of the church. He cares and he works tirelessly. He is indefatigable, sometimes impatient when the church lags in doing something he sees as so obvious. Peter has been married to Debbie Sutherland Bush for 34 years, and together they have 1 son, Nathan. Peter would be the first to admit that the work that has been accomplished in ministry over these years has been done together in partnership. For his contribution to pastoral ministry, to scholarly work in the service of the church and academy, to the Presbyterian Church at all its levels, and to the community, Peter has done all this with energy and faith. For all these reasons, President Van Eck, I present the Reverend Peter Bush, that you may confer on him the degree Doctor of Divinity honoris causa.
Authority of the Governing Board of Knox College and the University of Toronto, you are hereby admitted to the degree Doctorus Divinitatis honoris causa. Thank you for everybody and everything, the benediction. The grace of God, the love of Christ, and the peace of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen.